Understanding the anatomy of experience. And today I want to talk about healing multi-generational trauma and a possible solution, what is being called intergenerational trauma. So I'd like to address this today for the simple reason that we are seeing the effects of that now everywhere in the world. We are seeing the effects of intergenerational trauma. And I want to talk a little bit about the epigenetics of this, even though it is not yet fully understood. But it is becoming clear through scientific experiments and deeper understanding is that in some way or another, we and every generation is influenced by the experiences of its ancestors. Even though we were not there to have those experiences as these body-mind entities, we were not there in the Civil War, we were not there during the days of slavery and servitude, we were not there during all these immense, traumatic, global genocides and wars. Even though we were not there, we carry in our genes the memory of that trauma. And only recently are scientists beginning to understand how that happens. One of the questions that revolves around what we call the hard problem of consciousness is how is memory stored and where is memory stored? Is there a physical basis for memory? Once we understand non-duality, we don't even actually ask these questions. Is there a physical basis? Is there a mental basis, psychological basis? Neurological basis, although we do address those inquiries, but once we understand that the deeper reality, everything is one reality, and that mind, brain, body, personal relationships, social interactions, the world at large, the ecosystem, and the entire universe are all one reality, one process, one consciousness appearing differently, then we can actually address what we're talking about at any level, brain level, biological level, genetic level, epigenetic level, etc. And then we can see what possible solution there may be. So here's an experiment. You take some mice, expose them to a smell that they really like. Let's choose one, lavender. And they enjoy the smell, they seem to. But now you take a few other mice and you give them mild electrical shocks. And then the next generation of the mice that were exposed to both the smell and the electrical shocks, they are fearful of the smell of lavender, even though they never received the electrical shocks. Now, my friends in the field, including epidemiologists and neuroscientists, tell me that they've noticed this phenomena in other expressions as well. So a friend of mine lives on a farm in Hawaii, and he says he lives next to a pasture where the cows are afraid to touch the fence because the fence was electrically wired to give shocks, even mild shocks. And now the descendants of those cows that were exposed to the shocks are afraid of the fence. How's this memory transferred from one generation to another? Memory of trauma, memory of any experience, memory of culture, even memory of predisposition to language or art or science or music. How is it transferred, or is it transferred? That's a question right now for many scientists who are trying to figure it out. But something may be involved called neuronal gene translation. neuronal gene transcription. And this means that during morphogenesis and differentiation, which means from being a fertilized ovum to a fully developed human baby or infant, during that period, there is a lot of epigenetic activity, which means activity in between the genes that regulates the activity of the genes. And apparently, this activity of the genes can be influenced by the memories of previous generations. So you could be born with a predisposition to depression or anxiety or inflammation or lack of self-esteem or violence or being more vulnerable to traumatic injury, and also being more vulnerable as a perpetrator of violence, more likely to be a perpetrator of violence. So when we look at this history, and we look at the history of colonialism, which began about 500 years ago, and had its origins in England and France and the Dutch and the Portuguese and the Spanish territories, we actually can see that from the early 1800s, if not before that, actually much before that, 1500s, 1600s, there's been a lot of trauma and violence inflicted on people who were subjects of colonial conquest. We cannot deny that. There was slavery, there was servitude, there was inhumanity, there was punishment, there was trauma, there was violence, there was rape, there was pillage, there was murder, all in the name of empire. That's a fact. Whether we like it or not, it's a fact. And we are all those who were the descendants of the colonialists and those who are the descendants of the conquered, all of us, the colored people, the brown people, the Indians, the American Indians, the natives of Australia, New Zealand, the Americas, all of us are descendants of those that were traumatized. And then there are descendants of those that inflicted the trauma, and both the descendants of those that were traumatized and the descendants of those that inflicted the trauma are now having to deal with the conflict in the world, now having to deal with everything that has gone wrong, from sustainability to social justice to economic justice to personal relationships to social interactions to professional relationships to the way we do business, the way we do transactions, the way we do trade, the way we treat each other. All of that is the result of that, both amongst the descendants of those who were the subjects of trauma and the descendants of those who were the perpetrators of trauma. That history is there. And so we come into this world epigenetically programmed to feel a certain way about ourselves, about who we are, about our identity, about our racial identity, national identity, ethnic identity, economic identity, religious identity, all of those identities which are totally provisional and have absolutely no basis in reality other than we made them up. Other than, they reflect the climate and the geographical location and the amount of exposure to the sun and the culture and the art and the stories and the mythologies that we heard. Other than that, we are the same being in different disguises. But the epigenetic trauma, which is a reflection of the stories of our ancestors, and these stories go back to medieval times, the Bronze Age, and even further back in history. these stories are recycled as our biology. And therefore, while Black Lives Matter is a very good initial catalyst for change and transformation in the direction of a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world, it will fizzle out unless we actually see the death of the old story, a total honest confrontation of the story happening around us at this moment with COVID-19, eco-destruction, climate change, social and economic injustice, and intergenerational trauma. Right now we're seeing that. Unless we actually honestly confront the past story, present story, and dream a new story and put it into action so we actually can manifest that story, unless we do that, we will have failed as a human species. Our humanity will be incomplete if we do that. So we need to complete our humanity, and that's part of our evolutionary journey. So the first thing is to understand story. All stories have certain features. They have the divine, diabolical, sacred, profane, evil, good, up, down, sinner, saint, paradox, contradiction, ambiguity. But all stories ultimately are love stories. Even the horrendous stories that we see of tragedy, the call is love. The call is higher vision. The call is transcendence. The call is getting to know ourselves as the deepest reality that is differentiating into what we call the entire universe. And that has to be a story that is not only thought out, envisioned, it has to be an emotional story. And ultimately, it has to transcend all stories. It's not an easy task. So while interfaith dialogue, while inter-race dialogue, while Black Lives Matter, while all lives matter, are extremely useful memes and catalysts for what we might call sacred activism and conversation and even dialogue is not good enough. What we need is the commonality of sacred experience, irrespective of our religion, irrespective of our ethnic background, irrespective of our religious background, irrespective of our national background, irrespective of the color of our skin. We need a new context, new meaning, new understanding of relationships, new understanding of entanglement, new understanding of inseparability, new understanding of non-local correlation at the level of experience, not at the level of intellect alone, not even at the level of emotions alone, but at the level of experience of what the great wisdom traditions have called self-realization. Realizing the self. What is the self? Which is beyond all stories. The infinite self. The sacred self. The self of all existence. The self of all experience. The self of all imagination. The self of all vision. The self of all sensations, images, feelings, thoughts, perceptions. Unless we have that common experience of unity consciousness, or at least work towards unity consciousness through spiritual practice. Spiritual practice means just self-awareness, nothing more than that. I'm not talking about religion or ideological frameworks or religious dogma. Not talking about that. I'm talking about self-awareness as a human and even a meta-human experience. Meta going beyond the conditioned human mind. What can be called metacognition. Metacognition is knowing ourselves, having an experience without judgment, and knowing ourselves, making choices consciously. If you can just remember just those two things, knowing ourselves, having a conscious experience, whatever that is, and knowing ourselves, making conscious choices, we have moved from human to metahuman, from cognition to metacognition, higher knowing, expanded knowing, that leads to insight, intuition, inspiration, imagination, creativity, a higher vision, and ultimate healing. Metacognition. It involves awareness of perceptual activity, awareness of the body, awareness of what is happening inside the body, awareness of mental space, awareness of thoughts, emotions, imagination, awareness of awareness. That's real waking up. And if enough of us can do that, there'll be a new story, a new humanity. Our humanity will be reaching completion. So yes, we can create online and offline communities of service, which is called seva in Hindi, in Sanskrit, seva. Communities, sangha, satsanga. Satsanga means communities looking for the truth. And then simran, which is a Sanskrit word. Simran means remembrance. There's an Urdu word for it also, zikr, the name of the divine. Mantras are names of the divine. Different aspects, qualities, qualia of infinite divine consciousness. That's what mantras are. That's what sutras are. That's what the 99 names of Allah are. That's what the 1,000 names of Vishnu are. Those are just qualities of awareness. Just shifting our attention to qualities of awareness that actually link our being to the infinite, cosmic, formless, irreducible, infinite intelligence at the heart of creation. And we are that. We are also that. We are an aspect of that. And if we can collectively practice sadhana, globally, everywhere, sadhana, spiritual practice, zikr, remembrance, sangha, community, seva, service, then we will see emergence. Emergence is when there is maximum diversity of opinion, of talent, of strength, artists, humanitarians, songwriters, entertainers, poets, hip-hop artists, graffiti artists, artists who serve as the conscience of humanity. When we all come together as a sangha, when we celebrate existence, not just human existence, but all existence, when we celebrate awareness of existence, when we evoke, ignite the fire of passion in the direction of truth, goodness, beauty, harmony, when we begin to undergo our personal transformation, then social transformation happens and emergence happens. And there is transparency, there's openness, and there's no fear of being criticized. There's openness to feedback, and there's a higher calling, a higher purpose. There's authenticity, there's integrity, there's responsibility, there's a calling, and then off we go, and we give birth to a new story. Only a new story, a new lived story, can rectify the trauma of the past, the multi-generational trauma of the past, the history of violence and predation of the past. And we need everyone for this. We need the descendants of those that were hurt, and we need the descendants of those that imparted the hurt. Not everybody, we can't stereotype, we can't generalize, but there is trauma. And today, of course, we all understand there's something called post-traumatic stress disorder, which is trauma in the past influencing biology in the present, causing inflammation, causing compromising of the immune system, causing susceptibility to disease, lack of self-esteem, depression, guilt, shame, humiliation, hostility, violence, fear, anger is what is happening in the world. It's reflected in the inflammatory world. Now, we need to heal it. Can we do so? Are you ready to do so? Are you ready to be the change you want to see in the world? You know, we say, how can that make a difference? Well, our mind is part of the global mind. Our brain is part of the global brain. And now that global brain is right there on the internet. The internet is the global brain, reflecting the human condition, divine and diabolical, sacred and profane, and everything in between. That's the human brain that you're looking at on the internet, the global human brain. Can we rewire it? Yes, we can. If we are honest about the past and let it go at some point, if we are fully aware in the present and observe it without judgment, but if we are also ready to reimagine the future where the death is an old story. Death of that old story happens. Context, meaning, relationship, archetypes, and the whole idea of what it is to be great. Great is not conquest. Great is not predation. Great is not hostility. Great is not winning. Great is not I am superior or you are inferior. Great is not corruption. Great is not cronyism. Great is not influence peddling. Great is not power mongering. Great is not simulating leadership but being a gangster in the conditioned mind. The gangster is the conditioned mind. And the leader who's a gangster is also the conditioned mind. And that is an expression of the collective conditioned mind. Are we ready today, right now, to confront our own conditioning, our own traumas, whether we inflicted them or we were the recipients of them? Are we honestly ready to look at what the past was? Are we honestly ready to feel what we feel as a result of that? Are we honestly ready to express our vulnerabilities? Are we honestly ready to share our stories? Are we honestly ready to respect each other? Are we honestly ready to understand injustice? Are we honestly ready to understand fear? Are we honestly ready to forgive and ask for forgiveness? Are we honestly ready to refrain from belligerence? Are we honestly ready to embrace emotional and spiritual intelligence? Are we honestly ready to go beyond stereotyping and verbal formulas? Are we honestly ready to love? If we are, then we are ready. And the time is now. The time is not. If not now, then when? Najat from Morocco says, I am ready. Rajiv says, awareness is very important. Stephen says, tell me more. Yes, that's the point. We will continue with these conversations. But I think all of you are saying, I'm in. Well, I'm in too. We don't have to struggle anymore to learn. We simply have to remember. Remember that which was dismembered. So I'm going to read two short poems from Tagore. Languor is upon your heart, and the slumber is still on your eyes? Has not the word come to you that the flower is reigning in splendor among thorns? Wake up, please wake up. Let not the time pass in vain. At the end of the stony path, at the end of the stony path in the country of virgin solitude, my friend, there is a consciousness awaiting you. Deceive yourself no more. Wake up. Please wake up. What if the sky pants and trembles with the heat of the midday sun? What if the burning sand spreads its mantle of thirst? Is there no joy in the deep of your heart? At every footfall of yours, will not the harp of the road break out in sweet music, even in pain? Wake up, my friend. Wake up. God bless.